Welcome back to the Darius Gant Show. I'm your host, Darius Gant, as well as founder and CEO of Tesoro AI, where we help companies to build and scale both AI teams and AI solutions. On this podcast, we focus on cutting-edge technology, more specifically, artificial intelligence. By getting up close and personal with the innovative founders who are building out AI solutions, we learn exactly what steps they're taking to build and deploy these solutions, as well as the real-world problems that are being solved. In this episode, we sit with Marc Bernstein, who is the CEO and founder of a company by the name of Balto. Balto is killing the game now. They're based out of St. Louis and growing like a weed. Balto is leveraging artificial intelligence to guide contact centers and sales groups in complex conversations. So imagine having a communications guru sitting right next to you, enabling you to deliver the right information at the right time on your call. The company just raised $10 million, and what I love about them is that it's a tech company based in the Midwest and is led by a founder who started off as an account executive and figured out how to use artificial intelligence to solve a unique problem that he saw in the market. If you or your team is considering scaling your AI solution or AI team, be sure to reach out to the team here at Tesoro AI. We've assembled leading experts in both data science and machine learning. So whether we're talking about AI strategy, custom software development, data labeling, or staff augmentation, we've got a strong team here that has your back. So head over to www.tesoroai.com. All right, without further ado, let's hop into the show and hear from Marc. All right, Marc, welcome to the show, man. I'm excited about what you guys are doing. I'm always trying to keep up with tech companies in the Midwest. So to hear that you guys are out there in St. Louis killing it, I'm excited, man. I saw the recent Series A, 10 million, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these facts, but you guys are at about 45 people looking to double that and double revenue in the past year. Is all that about correct?
All that's about correct. We're at around 60 people now. So we've already started the doubling, and we're trying to get to well over 100 folks this year. So we're well over 100 folks. And then if you want to be well over 100 folks in our space, you need to not double revenue, but triple it. So
There you go.
we're shooting for that too. I hope you can't hear the crushing stress in my voice right now. I'm just kidding. But we got a lot of big stuff ahead of us for sure.
Super interesting, man. And you hear a lot of folks coming out of Silicon Valley, New York, the bigger cities. So for you all to be not only just a high growth tech company, but also leveraging cutting edge technology in the platform coming out of St. Louis, that's exciting. Tell me about your background, though. I would love to learn, because you weren't a guy who was a data scientist and studied deep mathematics. So we'd love to learn what your beginnings were, and then we'll talk more about like how you actually got into technology.
Yeah, Darius, absolutely. I'm not a data scientist. I'm a dude with a problem. And I was a salesperson in the the SaaS space, and I experienced the problem that the company I started solves. And that is that you go into your manager's office for coaching, and they say, Darius or Marc, next time you're in a call, make sure you do this, this, and this. You got to ask more questions. Don't talk so much. Make sure that you set next steps. Don't forget to set the next steps. And your manager tells you all that stuff, and you leave and you go, okay, wow, man, I just learned so much. I needed to go do all of that. And then you get on the phone call, end the call, you hang up the phone, and you say to yourself, I totally freaking blew that.
Yeah.
I blew it. I was just coached on this stuff 15 minutes ago, and I didn't do any of it. And I realized from there that the problem, the bigger problem, isn't analytics or insights on like what to do. We have all that stuff. It's on the internet, and there you can get better and better, and you can make improvements, but the answers are there. The challenge is really doing it in the moment that you need to do it. And if it's hard enough for one person to do that, what if you have a 10 or 20 or 30 person sales organization, or 100 or 1,000 person contact center? Good freaking luck getting everyone to do the things they need to do on every single call consistently to keep your close rates up and keep your customers happy. So I experienced that problem and was only a couple years out of school, about 2 years out of school, before starting Balto. And so my background is going to school, having a problem, and starting a tech company.
Interesting, interesting. And I can definitely see where you all are stepping in and really being a resource for, let's just say, a sales manager, right? To your point, they've taught you all these things, but a lot of times I feel like a lot of organizations, they try to leverage someone who's more senior to then come down and train people, but then that person ends up being, you have to take them from being on the road or actually making sales calls themselves, so they become almost in a way like less productive because they need to either be sitting next to someone who is on the phones, right, trying to get off the ground, where you guys are able to step in and say, this is your coach, right? The training material is within the system. Here's your coach who will be with you from day one, right, versus you
Yeah.
having to say, what did you say again? What was that line I should be using?
Happens all the time. And the thing is, the top performers usually hate it. Unless they think that they're potentially about to get a promotion and they're going to be a supervisor, or they're shooting for something like that, which, by the way, top performers usually don't want to because they usually get bonused real well. But let's say they're shooting for that supervisor role and that they want to move up in the organization. Well, that's when they would enjoy coming over. But a lot of times that position isn't there for them. So they feel their paycheck being taken away and they're saying, hey, I'm not doing what I'm best at. And the big challenge is that it's a one-to-one activity. You take the top performer off the phones and they're helping one person get better on their skills. It's not a one-to-many activity. Usually you're not taking the top performer off the phone and have them teach a class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you teach a class, what portion of the things that you taught get remembered and get executed on? And what
Right.
we're finding is that, and there's a whole bunch of research out there, it started with the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve in the 1800s, found that you're going to forget around 59% of the information you learn after just a week. 59%. So a overwhelming majority of what you learn is gone a week after you learned it. It makes, in that case, it twice as expensive to take a top four off the phone because only half of what they teach you actually remember.
Yeah, yeah. And you also mentioned contact centers. Like I've seen some examples of folks who leverage contact centers and they want them to follow a script, right? So whether it be like a rebuttal, but there's a certain script they want to follow. The challenge is most people aren't following the script. Is there something that you all are doing to aid that process?
Yeah. So the first thing you want to ask is, why aren't people following the script? Is it because they just like breaking rules? Usually not. Is it because the script is not effective? Usually that's a piece of it. But the biggest piece of it is that nobody wants to go down and sound like a robot. No one wants to go down the page and say word for word, line by line, every single thing they need to say, because that's not what a conversation's about. And the absolute top performers, they'll hit the key points on the script. They'll hit the flow of the script. They'll hit the feeling on the script, but they're not saying word for word because they know that person A may need one approach and person B may need another.
Right.
So, what we've done is we, it's funny, I'll often call Balto the anti-script. We say, tear your scripts up, throw them out, because reading from top to bottom, word for word, is dead. What you want to do is break it into the key points, the moments, the turning points in your call, and have those key points, those turning points on lock. So just give them a couple guideposts, give them a few guideposts. And we put that actually into a checklist for people. And we say, have everyone hit your checklist and then put in the top 10 or 15 or 20 different situations that come up that people mess up on their calls. Put in the things where people struggle. And let's put a checklist there too and have just the key points, the basics that you got to hit. And it turns out that when you give folks the freedom to put their own content in and to weave the narrative how they want to weave it, as long as they hit the main points, that's the right balance. So people will follow the script if you give them the freedom to not follow the script.
That reminds me a lot of public speaking, right? The best public speakers aren't up there reading prepared the entire speech that has been prepared. It's like trigger words that reminds them to hit a key point. And so is that, am I understanding correctly? That's the approach where whoever the caller is, so maybe a potential customer, they say something and then a trigger word or phrase or something pops up that alerts the person, the sales rep or the contact center rep to say a specific line or make a specific point?
Yeah, it's pretty close. So, what you'll hear some sort of trigger. And usually, by the way, it's more than a word. Because one of the things is when you're delivering what we call real-time guidance, you're helping out agents live while they're on the call, automatically analyzing the call and giving them feedback recommendations right there in the moment. When you're doing that, the threshold for false positives is very, very low. Imagine you have this technology that says, hey, it's going to guide you through and give you advice and recommendations on everything you should be saying to the customer. Your first thought is, yeah, right. And then it says, oh, by the way, it'll be wrong a lot. You're like, I'm turning this thing off.
Yeah.
So your false positive threshold is very low. You can't give a wrong recommendation. Now, you can stay quiet. There can be a moment where the rep is struggling and they could use some help, but the AI isn't sure and they go, I don't want to screw you up. I got to let you have this one on your own. In which case, you're back to where you were before you had the technology. So you're not any worse off. But in the moments that you do deliver a recommendation, you gotta get it right. So with that said, it's usually more than one word or a couple words. It's usually the full contextual meaning of a sentence or a few sentences or different logic of where that sentence may place in the call. So Balto will listen for that, and then it'll usually pop up a sentence, and it'll give you a couple options, the sentences. So if you are stuck and you just need to get something out, you're not looking at one word and trying to spin up your own sentence in your own mind. If you said the price is too high and all I put down is I understand, then you have to figure out what you understand. So I understand how difficult it must be that your price is high and you sound silly. So let's put the full sentence out there and give you, by the way, the flexibility to not hit all the words, not hit 100.0% of the words, but say, hey, here's the full sentence. And if you're hitting a good portion of it, a majority of it, we'll give you credit for having used that recommendation. Okay. So that's the approach we use, is looking for more than just a word or two, but looking for the sentiment of what is expressed and then pairing that with a recommendation that's usually a sentence or two.
So Balto is actually understanding the context, the sentiment of what the person on the other line is saying. That recommendation, when it comes out, Balto is also hearing what the sales rep or contact center rep is saying to see if you will give them credit for actually using that recommendation. Is there some element of like sales analysis, right, where there's on the back end, managers can see, oh, okay, well, here's how our team are using, here's how the team is using each recommendation. Are they or are they not? And then what's the success rate?
The three things you just said, here's how the team is using it. Are they or are they not? And what is the success rate? Are the things that Balto provides in our reporting. Super spot on. And the way I'll usually explain to people is we're going to tell you how the team or the organization, depending on what level of the hierarchy you're looking at, how the team is doing over time. We're going to let you see person by person how every individual is doing and how they stack up to each other. And then you can even dig in and say call by call, moment by moment. How did that call go? How did that moment go? So we let you go all the way down there, all the way deep, starting with the organization, the team, down to the actual moment in the call.
Very interesting. And it sounds like this kind of solves one of those issues a lot of sales organizations have, where you have one rock star who's bringing in all the deals. And then you got a lot of other folks trying to figure it out, but you guys are enabling people to have a process that allows people at any level to basically, you raise the average quality sales rep so that you don't end up relying on that one person who does all the deals, and you got better performance across the board through some standardization of a process.
That's right. And in the sales space, in the technology space, a lot of people will use the term, cloning your rock star or cloning your best person. I get their expression there. You're creating multiple of your best person, but that's the future we're all afraid of, is clones. So what we say is that we are democratizing the rock star. We're taking the thing that the one person has as their secret sauce that lets them bring home big paychecks to their family, and sharing it with everyone.
Yeah.
And it'll even show you in the application when it gives you a recommendation. It'll say, hey, this is actually the top performing recommendation today, or the top performing recommendation this week. So if you don't know what to say and you're stuck, there'll be a little badge next to the recommendation that says, hey, this is the one to try.
Yeah, I can definitely see the ROI, why folks are excited about the product. I'm interested in, you mentioned, look, I started out a couple years out of school. I was a guy with a problem that needed to be solved. Then there's this technical element of building a software company. Yeah. How did you have this idea in your head for what needs to be built? What steps did you take to go from idea to actual MVP?
Yeah, so that's actually, I think, one of the most important decisions that we ever made, is how we made that exact decision, going from idea to MVP. And the strategy we used is go make that step as quickly as possible. Even if the technology is gross, even if it barely works the first time, even if it can only tell you one thing, if it only tells you, hey, you're talking too much, that's all it tells you. That's okay, because there's a lot of people out there who are talking too much who could use that tap on the shoulder. So the way that we saw it is we actually started selling the product before we had a product. And we were open and transparent with folks about that we don't have anything yet. So we would go to people who we thought could be good fits for this, and we say, hey, we're trying to build X. Doesn't exist yet. Is that something that you think would be useful? And then they'd say yes or no, and we dig in and really try to understand why. Like, what do you want out of it? Would you pay for it? Or is it just like, that'd be kind of cool if it existed, but I wouldn't actually pay for that? Like, you got to figure that out in the way beginning, because a lot of times folks will get feedback from the trial testers or beta testers, whatever it may be, and the feedback will say, well, it'd be really cool if you did this. And then they'll go build it and they go, it's not that cool though. It's like, I don't really want to.
Not cool enough for me to pay for it.
Yeah, I was just giving you an idea. We went out and sold the technology before we had it. And of course, by the way, we didn't sell anything, but we were getting real feedback from people of like, will you part with your money in order to buy this future software? And then after about 3 weeks of that process, we had a good enough concept what people wanted us to build that we had built a demo. And the demo was so janky that we actually had to write Python scripts live on the demo to start it up and make it work. So we're sitting there with a terminal in one monitor and the demo in the other, and we're writing lines of code, and our CTO is like patching into the database in real time to pull in the right information. It was crazy. But we were able to show people the picture of what the technology could do and what it would look like. And when we were able to show people the picture, we could then ask, so do you want it? And of course, again, everybody said no, which is perfect. That's great. You want those no's, because then you can say, great, what needs to change? What needs to be different? What is it missing? What does it have wrong? Like, tell me, what could we change that would maybe make you say yes? So we get all that feedback, and then we'd say, perfect. They'd say, well, I don't think it needs to tell you how much you're talking. It needs to tell you if you're talking too fast. And we'd say, perfect. Give us 2 weeks. Let's meet again, and we'll show you the technology is going to measure how fast you're talking. And then 2 weeks later, janky Python demo, but it'll show you how fast you're talking. So we did that iteration a number of times until we got our first sale. It took us about 5 months. It was June. We started the company in January 2017. It was June. It was 5 months, and we did no free trials. We wouldn't do a free trial. So our first sale was one user for 1 month for $500. That was our first sale, but it was worth it because we got the market to tell us, yes, we'll part with some money in order to try what you guys have. And that was the best feedback that we could possibly get.
Yes, great. And what did the, I guess, front end look like? What was the user interface initially? And I imagine it's changed since then, but just for you guys to be able to get that feedback and for the people to know whether this was something that they wanted to use.
So in the way beginning, it was actually two, let's say, almost like wave timelines, like an audio wave. And it would have one wave on the left for the customer and one wave on the right for the sales representative. And then as you talked, the wave would be moving and analyzing and doing its thing. And then we got feedback very quickly that said, hey, I'm watching these waves flowing, flickering the entire time. I can't pay attention to the call. Can you guys make this thing less distracting? So we said, all right, we're going to make a rule that Balto is only going to talk. It's only going to give you a recommendation, doesn't actually talk. It's only going to show you text. Yeah. It's only going to talk when it has something useful to say. Otherwise, that thing is going to be silent. So we made that change. And basically what it did is it had a couple of points that when you hit them, it would cross it out and say, kind of like a shopping list. Automatically, whenever you hit your point and you asked your question about how many square feet do you have in your facility, it would automatically cross out the square footage question. And then whenever one of the main events you programmed in that you were looking for happened, it would have just this little text box that would come up from the bottom with, at that time, a paragraph of things to say, because we didn't realize that you had to break it up into little chunks in order to really get people excited about it. But it would pop up that little box and we'd say, I'm sure some sales rep somewhere is going to say this full paragraph and win a deal. And I don't know if that happened. that was version 1.
Yeah, I mean, and that's interesting because it sounds like from day one, you all were pretty conscious of how people are interacting with the tech, right?
It's one of the biggest mistakes people make.
Right. Adoption is critical. You could have the best AI in the world, but salespeople are notorious. You can look at the CRM, for example, for not using stuff that adds complexity to their daily work. So love that you guys focus on that from day one. With these conversations, obviously with anything AI, you always have to begin with that data. What was your data journey? How were you able to collect the data that you need to then be able to deliver these recommendations?
Yeah, so you can break that into 2 different data sets. The first is, what data do you need to train the speech recognition model, the ASR model? And then the second is, what data do you need to train the NLP, the labeling? So with the ASR model, we actually started out way back in the day with Google's speech API. So we had that built out of the box. Then we moved to open source, and then we started customizing open source. We've been doing that for years to the point where it's our own now. So that's on the speech recognition side. And then on the NLP side, started out with just keywords. It started out with, because we have to provide the recommendation, but we don't have any context for whether it's right or wrong. And there's no way for us to at scale be able to label that data because there's no calls happening. So in the beginning, we said, all right, let's try 10, 15 keywords that we think are pretty representative of this thing, which, by the way, turned out to allow us to build a data set and get customers, but didn't result in a good customer experience in the beginning. Because you say, let's say that you're looking for someone having a concern about budget, not having enough budget. So you put in budget as a keyword. And then the customer would say, well, the problem isn't budget. It's that my wife won't approve it. And you're like, ugh, because then it'll pop up budget. So in the beginning, the false positives that we were offering were a little too high, We had to learn that lesson the hard way. But as we were able to do that, we were able to build up a bigger and bigger data set and move away from the budget keywords and move toward much more advanced NLP models.
Okay. And what was I'm curious what the initial team was like in order for you to lift this off the ground. Who was primarily focused on working with the NLP models? What you guys were doing in ASR, was that the CTO? Or did you have other folks in the mix in terms of helping you to scale up those solutions?
Yeah, I think that when you're starting to build up your team, I think you usually want to start with one or two superheroes and then scale out from there. So we
Mhm.
started with one or two superheroes. Started out with our CTO, and he was the kind of guy who knew a little bit of everything. So he knew audio engineering and how to do the audio routing. He knew the system level engineering. He knew very basics of how to use different libraries for speech to text. He knew the basics. Didn't do any like real NLP at the time, so he would say, "Hey, just put in some keywords." So it was him that he really got our start. And I think, by the way, if we had a 5-person engineering team and everyone's hacking at it together, it might have been a little too much noise when you just need one person with a lot of clarity to take that deep breath and sit in a dark room for 3 straight weeks and bring out a demo. So I don't know if it would have worked the same way if we had a larger team, even though at the time it was incredibly stressful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then how did you think about, you mentioned labeling data. Did you start doing that with the engineers on the team, or were you able to take another approach?
Yeah, so we actually started doing that with interns.
Okay.
I don't know if I would have repeated the same approach, but basically we wrote out a very clear list of definitions, and they would go through the transcript, and it was what we had called at the time the clicker picker. You are essentially clicking the label and you pick the right one, so it's the clicker picker.
Yeah.
And our interns were awesome. They were absolutely awesome, and we had a definition sheet, and then we also would QA a portion of their labels to make sure that they were properly calibrated. And we would hold contests for who can do the most. We would measure how many you can do per hour. We would measure the highest accuracy rate, who did the label assignment with the highest level of accuracy. And it was definitely a little painful, but it was a lot of fun. And I have personally clicker picked thousands of phone calls. I have personally clicker picked thousands of phone calls. So in the beginning, everyone has to do it. No one's too good to start labeling your data, or hopefully you have a labeled data set already, but no one's too good to do the hard work.
Yeah. And you mentioned you don't know if you would go that route again. What was it about going the intern route that may have been challenging or leads you to think, hey, maybe there's a different way to go?
The management of the process
Okay.
was really tough because it's a little bit, in that case, the blind leading the blind. The company had just started out. I was essentially a first-time manager. So here's a first-time manager managing first-time interns, doing a task that was new to all of us. And by the way, in that particular case, new to the NLP world.
Mm-hmm.
There was not, and I bet there is now, a beautifully labeled data set of sales and service phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to do it. So I think that the management of the process and figuring out how do you make changes, are your definitions even good? Does this hold up to statistical rigor? Even if it feels good in the moment, when you actually put it in production, does it act the way you thought it was going to act? That was one of the challenges.
Yeah.
Is beautifully curated and wonderfully labeled data set, and then we put it in production, and we would see that a whole bunch of corner cases and false positives we never considered would come up. I think it's just that overall management of the process was the tough stuff there.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I've heard has been helpful is to use an external team to do it, or just someone who's not on the even software side. One of my partners talks about doing QA all the time. And if you have one of the dev folks doing QA, they test for errors in the same way that they thought about coding. So you don't find the errors necessarily that someone who has no clue what's going on or has no exposure to the development process, right, would actually find, and maybe things that a user would find. So same thing applied to the labeling, some of these edge cases, right? Have you,
Yep.
I guess now that you can look back on the process, are there things that you would say that would have helped you in that time to be more efficient?
Yeah, so what you just said is totally accurate. And it became a new world when we transferred the ownership of labeling the data from the business side over to the engineering side, because they were able to apply the engineering tools to QA the data set and to figure out what was going to happen. And they wouldn't have that gap between labeling the data and how it actually behaves in production, or at least the gap was smaller. So I'm going back, I'm thinking I might have done that in the beginning, but at the same time, we had the one or two superhero team and that was it. So at any moment that they're spending QAing the data, they're not spending building out the non-existent software. So going back, I don't know if I would have done it differently, but I can tell you it would have been better and easier and more effective faster if we had done it differently. And if someone said, hey, Marc, here's an extra X number of dollars to hire a new engineer, you have one engineer and they're just going to spend the entire time making sure the data labeling is good, absolutely would have invested in that in retrospect.
Yeah, super interesting. And I guess now, what does that process look for you now?
Yes, we don't talk too much about that because we do have some pretty awesome secret sauce there. But
okay, I don't want to steal your thunder here.
no, all good. But what I can say is that we are continuing to every single day, every single week, continue to label and QA our data set. It's not done. It's not done. It's a giant work in progress.
Yeah.
And we enhance it. We look at it from different angles. We have a whole bunch of different data sources. There's obviously the transcript, which is one source of data. There's the call recording itself, which in many ways is the purest form of data because it's lossless in that way, or close to it. There is the user feedback. We give users the ability to vote with a thumbs up or thumbs down vote on whether the recommendation was correct or whether it was helpful. So we have all these different data sources that we're pulling into our process now. And that's been a really cool evolution to see as we get more and more sophisticated and as we continue to get more resources in the company, the way that we're able to continue to invest in old processes that we started from the way beginning and turn them into things that now are the cutting edge in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And the conversation we have a lot is like, look, the ML algorithms are one thing, and you'll be able to tweak those over time, but getting the data right is critical. And it's funny, I was reading a book. What was this? I can't remember the author of the book now, but he goes, yeah, the data is also, it's more important than the actual algorithm. And the response when he said it live, people were kind of like, because people don't really think about that when the AI is super sexy right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to digest. But a lot of times, right, that data is going to be with you forever. And that's ultimately what you're going to be used to train your algorithms over time. So getting that element, getting those processes right, a lot of times is more important than what you're doing on the algorithm tweaking side.
Darius, I can give you an example of that too.
Yeah.
When you can have a great data set, but if it's too small, you're completely going to have an overfit model, and that is going to not perform well in production. And in fact, we had that early on where we had a very small data set and the model that we produced had something like 98% accuracy in the particular domains that we were measuring. And 96%, I remember that exactly, actually. And I remember seeing that being like, oh, we did it. We did it. We won. That's the game. Everyone go home. We're finished. And we put it in production and it performed actually worse than some of our brute force kind of models that we had done. And that was a really interesting learning that said your data set needs to be clean and it needs to be huge. And if you don't have both of those aspects of it, what works as a theoretical exercise very well may not work when you're trying to produce cutting edge software.
Yes. So on that point, when you put it into production and then you have predictions that are obviously not as accurate as when you working with a training set, how's that conversation with customers? How's that conversation? Do you have to explain to, look, this is artificial intelligence. It takes some more time. Predictions are going to prove over time. But in my mind, you just have to manage expectations. And I'm curious what your process or what your experience has been there.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest parts, honestly. And I tell the company, and we're now 60 freaking people at the company or so.
Yeah.
And I tell folks that one of the things that's really special about Balto is to get where we got, we had to go through this valley of death. We had to go through this era where our software wasn't that accurate. And we were doing our best. We gave great customer service, and it was able to help some customers. It was really able to help some customers in some very specific ways, but it wasn't that accurate. That could have killed us. It really could have. And I think that the key there is that we had such a high touch customer service
Mm,
mindset where we were on the phone with our customers all the time. And they would say, this is inaccurate. And we go, oh, we're so sorry. Tell us, like, what is not accurate? Let us know what the problems are. And then boom, we got product feedback. And then we take that
right.
right to engineering, run over to the other room and say, hey, whoa, everyone, we need to change this specific thing that's not accurate. And we do a whole sprint to change that thing. And then we come back a week later and say, it's not great, but the agents did say it's better. And those little wins, that's what keeps your customers with you when they can see
Yeah.
that you took their feedback, you went and made a change, and it's getting better. Because they buy in the B2B software world, customers will buy in not just to what your product is now, but what your product will be 6
Mm,
months, 12 months, or longer from
yeah.
now. So if you can show them, like, hey, the right now, I need some work, but the 3 months is going to be good.
Yeah.
And if you back it up, people will often trust you. And then honestly, that forms lifelong relationships because the customers who trusted us in the beginning and took that leap with us, we are forever grateful to them. So whenever they need anything, they know that we have their back. And it's really cool to be able to build that relationship. And we wouldn't have been able to build that relationship if everything was perfect on day one.
Yeah, super interesting because I think generally in the market, right, when people use software, they expect it out of the box. This is going to do exactly what I needed to do. But when it's an intelligent or a cognitive solution that needs to learn over time, it's out of the box is going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
When you hire an employee, they're going to do something, but it takes a little time before they do it better than anyone else.
Yeah. If your employees have a ramp up, your software should too.
Well, and I think that's the beautiful thing about AI is, right, relative to traditional software. How many times do you have can you buy software and it continues to get better instead of buying software and say, hey, it is what it is.
Coolest parts about it. And customers love that narrative because you can form it right. You can make it exciting. You can say, hey, let's run a test. Let's see how it performs this week. And let's come back in 3 weeks and see how it does.
Yeah.
And then you're able to show the data and say, hey, look, this thing got better. And they go, whoa, that's really powerful. It's really powerful. And that's something that's really special about AI.
Yeah. Now let's talk about being in St. Louis, right? And just maybe we start with talent acquisition. You're always trying to get rock stars on the team. People generally think, hey, we need to go to Silicon Valley to hire the right people. What's been your experience in terms of being a company? Look, we're in the Midwest, and then going out and finding top talent.
So first of all, the right people are everywhere. And I think that we learn that as a world, that the right people are everywhere, including your company, Darius, where, a lot of folks, if you said, hey, did you know you can get seriously good engineers and AI NLP talent in Medellin? You'd say, seriously? I didn't know that. A lot of people would, at least. Great engineers are everywhere. So then the next question is, how did we get our first engineers? And we had a model in the beginning that said, we're going to try to have, that those 1 or 2 rock stars and then try to diffuse as much knowledge into their brains as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hire people who are great at soaking it up, learning, adapting, and changing, rather than people who may have done it all before and know it all before. Because by the way, those folks, while they're unquestionably talented, often have higher standards of what they expect from an organization. You can't be like, oh, sorry, we have 4 customers and one of them just churned. If you just started out and you're a seriously rock star NLP engineer, you might go, ooh, I don't know about that. So we were able to have a group of junior engineers who are highly coachable, very sharp, and we knew in just a couple of years would be the absolute best around. So we started by hiring junior, filling their brains with knowledge, and then now those are the leaders in our engineering organization. Those are the leaders. So that model worked. Now, we probably could have used a couple more senior folks early on to help diffuse more knowledge around the organization. So I might do it a little bit differently now, especially if we were well-funded, because we were completely bootstrapped, 100% self-funded the first 18 months. But we found engineers that want to take a chance on us, and we took a chance on them, and we all said we're in it together, and that made a really big difference.
Okay. Any secrets to being able to bootstrap for 18 months? I feel like some folks are like, look, I don't even know how I get to that point. What were the couple things that allowed you guys to do that?
Yeah, I think honestly, the single biggest thing is living in an incredibly affordable city. St. Louis did it. St. Louis did it. And I was able to live off savings for over a year. And I can tell you, if I was in New York, that would have lasted me, not a year, right? So that's the first thing is, can you make your cash go far? Because we didn't bootstrap with a giant lump of money. We were 20 some odd year olds.
Yeah.
So that was a big piece, is make your money go far. And then I would say the second piece is be very intentional about your milestones, because you're not trying to build the entire company based on your own personal life savings. You're trying to build to a point where you can then finance the company the way you want to finance it.
Right.
So our milestone was, let's get 100K in sales, and let's get a product that is out the door that while rocky, customers do love, and customers will stand behind and they'll reference. And we did that. We beat our 100K in sales. We got a product out the door that customers mostly loved. And that allowed us to have a good enough story to do a real fundraise.
Okay. And yeah, I think that what I see as well, you made this point, but there's a focus on getting sales. What is the minimum we need from a technology standpoint to then be able to get sales? And then when you go to market to fundraise, it's not like we're funding a dream. No, this is actually a product that has traction already. We're just
100%.
pouring gas on the fire versus bringing everything, versus us as the VC or as the investor bringing everything together.
Yeah. One of the things I think was really interesting is when we started, half of our product was in a spreadsheet still. So we gave you the real-time coaching that helped your agents be better live on the phone call. And then all the reporting, we said, just download the data. We're going to give you the ability to download the data. It's a CSV, and you can go build dashboards and upload it to your BI suite or whatever you want. So when you talk about how done the product needs to be, it doesn't need to be that done. And by the way, it was definitely, our customers thanked us profusely when we actually, built real dashboards and real reporting. They were thrilled when that came. So I'm not saying that I would have kept that forever, but I think the point is, if you can satisfy the need, you don't need to satisfy it beautifully, but if they can get the thing they want to get, and it's hard and it's annoying, but they can get it, that's usually a good place to start.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, I got a couple more questions for you. Quick fire here, but curious what your favorite tech tool has been and why. Well, we'll start there. We'll start with that one.
I'm going to give the most business person answer in the world, but it's Zoom. We built our business on Zoom. Balto is almost 100% inside sales. We do almost all of our sales over Zoom, and doesn't feel awkward to us now. And by the way, when the pandemic came, we were ready. We knew how to close 6-figure deals over Zoom. So just really, really incredible that the video sharing and the video conferencing and the ability to share content has come so far. And we're absolute huge fans of Zoom. So I think that would probably be the number one, of course, aside from Balto.
So they've earned their praise. They've earned their praise. Okay. And then one person that has inspired you, whether that's someone in AI, someone in business.
Yeah, I think that I'm inspired by really big thinkers who make important changes. So I think Elon Musk might be the guy. And I recognize that there's a lot there.
Yeah.
And a lot there. But when I go to bed and I think we have limited time on this earth, what do I want to do? And I see what he has accomplished in so many different domains and how much he teaches himself. It honestly makes me think time to step my game up. I think that's what inspiration's all about.
Yeah, I'm sure have you read what's his book called?
I know Elon Musk has a book.
Yeah, this used to be one of my favorite books that I had on Audible. I don't know if it's called Elon or whatever, but I'll send it to you. But yeah, I had that thing on repeat just to hear some of the crazy ideas he had and how he had to jump out of a plane for a lot of them in terms of, look, this just sounds insane. Like, you're really going to do this? It's like, yeah, let's go for it.
Someone was telling me that starting a car company, one of Balto's investors actually telling me, is one of the most expensive types of companies that you can start in the world. Incredibly capital intensive. You need a ton of money to get anything out the door. So that's one of the reasons that there's so few car companies and why it's so easy for them to fail is it's so capital intensive. So
yeah,
he took a bet. It's the first American car company I think we've had in decades. And, just talking about Tesla, and it looks like he did it.
Yeah. It's when someone says they're going to pull off some crazy idea, you're like, yeah, okay. And then you're like, wait, this is actually working. So very cool, man. I appreciate you just taking some time out. I know you are super busy. We'll be rooting for you on our end. Hit that 300% growth here. So anything exciting coming up that you would like to announce?
I think probably the most exciting thing is we're building our company, folks. Check our talent board out. It's balto.ai.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we get on the show page, actually get you guys all linked up there so that people can find you pretty easily.
Thank you, Darius. Really appreciate it.
All right, Marc. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And then we look forward to keeping updated on what you guys are building out there at Balto.
You got it, my friend. Until next time.
All right.